years after ballots were cast in New Hampshire's first presidential primary, the tradition is under fire again, despite recognition of its importance from many.
I like New Hampshire just for that reason, because you have to do retail politics. You have to look people in the eye, listen to their stories.
And now, the duty to protect it is being passed on from the former guardians.
This primary, this doesn't come to us every 4 years. You have to work at it. And if you don't work at it, you're going to lose it.
To the new protectors of the primary.
In the end, election's about the voters. And New Hampshire brings that front and center, and that's why it's important that we continue with the primary.
Continuing with something that's made New Hampshire so special, as we now continue with First in the Nation, 100 years of tradition.
Welcome back to First in the Nation, 100 years of tradition. I'm Josh McKelvin. For the past half hour, we've been talking a lot about how important the New Hampshire primary is and has been to the Granite State, who's been involved in the process over the years, and how it's also under attack. More now on what it would mean if the whole thing became regionalized or even morphed into a one-size-fits-all national election, and why so many people here are so dedicated to defending it.
I don't mean to denigrate New Hampshire or Iowa, but they shouldn't be the ones choosing who's going to be president.
So we know how Harry Reid feels about the selection process, but by the testimony of the candidates themselves, we also know there is very real concern that the New Hampshire primary is under direct threat.
I've never been more worried about the early primary states than I am today.
There are voices in Washington that are arguing for getting rid of New Hampshire's first in the nation status. I think that is absolute lunacy.
Lunacy or not, the voices are real, and they're getting louder. Last fall, the outgoing chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, caused a stir when he said he was open to the idea of regional primaries. One idea breaks the country into quarters, and the order that the 4 primaries would take place would rotate with each election cycle. No matter whose turn it is to lead things off, it would be a lot of ground to cover, and many believe it would completely change the complexion of the presidential race.
Now, while I may not have $1 billion in my pocket,
when they're national primaries or regional primaries, the big money in politics shines, not the individual voter like takes place here in New Hampshire. And so national parties who want to regain that power would much rather have that power rest with them and with the big money people in politics and with the television advertising and with the candidates that are picked by the establishment. New Hampshire thwarts that and does a good job at it.
Come on, give me a big hug.
Thank you. In a regional primary setting, intimate house parties with the candidates would likely be a thing of the past. Unscheduled diner stops would morph into staged photo ops, and the vetting that comes with the rigors of honest town hall meetings would likely often be replaced with big tarmac rallies built on flash over substance. Sure, New Hampshire isn't immune to the gravity of star power, but voters also seem to know when it's time to get down to business.
New Hampshire voters are coming out to these events because they're doing a civic duty. They're trying to vet these candidates, they're trying to ask the tough questions, trying to ask the follow-up questions, and that's good for the American process. That's good for the other 49 states.
But to really understand New Hampshire's role, we need to go back to what Harry Reid said a moment ago.
They shouldn't be the ones choosing who's going to be president.
Obviously, no one has ever been sworn in right after winning the New Hampshire primary. And history certainly shows the primary winner is no lock for the White House.
You helped remind everyone that politics isn't a game.
What New Hampshire does do, along with the other early contest states, is prepare candidates to make their case to the rest of the country.
You made it clear that at this moment, in this election, there is something happening in America.
There is no state like New Hampshire. The people of New Hampshire are educated and understand the importance of their vote, and to have any other state be first in the nation would be a dramatic mistake and a grievous error.
This now is a race between the mainstream and the extreme.
You cannot buy a vote in New Hampshire. They want to see it.
And over the years, New Hampshire has seen a lot, which brings us to experience and tradition. Secretary of State Bill Gardner is fond of saying New Hampshire's place in the process will always endure as long as the people have the will to keep it. And yes, tradition matters.
There's a reason why the Kentucky Derby's in Kentucky. There's a reason why the Rose Bowl is where it is. There's a reason why all kinds of different cultural events are where they are. And it's the same reason that New Hampshire has the primary. It's here because its birth was here.
All right, we are joined now by the New Hampshire members of their respective national parties, Steve Dupree and Kathy Sullivan. Good to see you. Steve, we're going to start with you because it seems like the latest threat is coming out of the RNC. Reince Priebus, as we just heard, talking about the idea of regional primaries, lotteries, all kinds of different things. How real is this threat to our place in the process?
It's very real. Up until about 10 or 20 years ago, the Republican National Committee sat back and let states jockey. And Bill Gardner's done a tremendous job moving the date of the primary, threatening other states, and really done a superb job. About 10 years ago, the party started to wake up to the fact that they have the right to control the nominating process. So the threat is real, because if they ever really decided to do so, they could say any state that holds a primary before or outside of our approved calendar, any candidate who puts their name on the ballot in such a state forfeits the right to be nominated for president, not just forfeit the delegates in the state. I expect we will see that kind of proposal brought forward to our convention, and we'll do our best to defeat it. New Hampshire isn't about picking the nominee. It's about giving that lesser known, lesser well-funded candidate a fair shot. If you don't have New Hampshire, Iowa, and South Carolina, I think of our 16 candidates who filed, 4 could have run.
Sure. And Kathy, bringing you into this, I mean, how important? Well, I mean, obviously there's philosophical differences on the issues when it comes to the parties. When it comes to this topic, though, here in New Hampshire, how important is it that people are in lockstep? Because obviously there's been threats on the Democratic side as well.
Sure. I mean, I always tell people when I first became party chair years ago, Hugh Gregg, who was one of the great protectors of the primary, came by my office and he said, your most important job is to keep the New Hampshire primary first, and that's coming from a former Republican governor. And he just wanted to make it clear that that is very important and that it does cross party lines. We need to work together as best we can to keep New Hampshire first in the nation. And again, to remind people that we're not trying to pick a president. We're not trying to be controlling. What we're trying to do is to make a level playing field so that all sorts of candidates can come into our state and present their positions, present themselves to the people of New Hampshire. At the national party level, we have to deal with our national committees and convince them not to do something that would get in the way of New Hampshire being the first in the nation primary. And on the Democratic side, I mean, I know what Steve's going through. Back about 10 years ago, we had some real threats towards New Hampshire. People were saying that New Hampshire wasn't diverse enough. And what the Democratic National Committee ended up doing was take 4 states and have them go early, Iowa, then New Hampshire, and Nevada, and South Carolina, to provide the diversity that the process needed.
Yeah, and as this case is made, Steve, we're almost out of time. How important is it that New Hampshire, Iowa, South Carolina, and Nevada are in lockstep and talk about, you know, the importance of the carve-out states? And it's not just New Hampshire out on an island.
I will say on the Republican side, it's 3 of those that count a lot. We accommodated the Democratic Party at Reed's insistence because they were threatened in New Hampshire, and we added Nevada. I think given our own devices, Nevada wouldn't be one of the early 4, but we all work together. They're our cousins. We have to make our case. It's a long fight. It culminates at the convention, and then it will carry over for another 1.5 years after that. When you're about 2 years out from a presidential race, then it's over. It's too late to tinker with it.
All right, we'll keep our eyes on it. Guys, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
And I'll be there for you till the last dog dies. And I want you to remember,
I think we finally have a poll without a margin of error.
They're remembered as 2 of the most successful candidates in the New Hampshire primary. Next, a look at what set apart the campaigns of John McCain and Bill Clinton.